Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
I work at a small, family-run diner on the outskirts of town. It's the kind of place that sees a steady flow of regulars, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a quick bite. It's nothing fancy, just a few booths, a long counter, and a kitchen that always smells like bacon grease and coffee. We close at midnight, and on most nights, I handle the last shift alone, save for the cook in the back. It's usually quiet by then. The late-night regulars keep to themselves, nursing their coffees, scrolling their phones, or chatting in low voices. But one man always stood out. He came in every night at exactly 11:30, never earlier, never later. He wasn't a regular in the usual sense. He never spoke to anyone, never made eye contact, and never deviated from his routine. He would walk in, sit in the farthest booth, order the same thing, a plain hamburger, no toppings, no fries, and a glass of water. Then he would That was the unsettling part. He didn't eat like a normal person. He took small, calculated bites, chewing so slowly it was almost mechanical. He never used his hands, only the dull diner knife and fork, slicing the burger into precise pieces. He ate every meal like it was his last, like he was memorizing the sensation of every bite. In the way he watched people, no, not watched, exactly. It was more like he was waiting. The first few weeks, I chalked it up to harmless eccentricity. Maybe he had a disorder, or maybe he was just a lonely man with a rigid routine. But then, small things started to get off. One night, after he left, I went to clear his table and found the knife still resting on his plate, upright, as if he just placed it down mid-motion. The burger had been cut into perfect squares, but only half had been eaten. The rest sat there untouched. Another night, I noticed he never blinked. That once, he would sit there, eating in that slow, deliberate manner, staring straight ahead, unblinking, for the entire 30 minutes he was there. Then, last night happened. It was quiet, just me and the cook in the back, when he walked in at his usual time. But something felt different. His steps were heavier, his movements less fluid, and when he sat down, he didn't immediately look at the menu like he always did. Instead, he turned his head, slowly, unnaturally, until he was looking directly at me. Not at the menu, not at his usual seat, at me. My stomach turned to ice. I forced a polite smile and grabbed my notepad, but my hands were trembling. "Your usual?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. He didn't respond right away. He just kept looking at me. Then, in a voice that didn't sound quite right, too smooth, too careful, he said, "I've been practicing." I don't know why, but that sentence hit me like a gut punch. "Practicing what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. For the first time, he smiled, a slow, creeping smile that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned forward, just slightly, and whispered, "Eating like you." I stepped back instinctively, knocking into the counter behind me. My breath hitched. Before I could say anything, he did something he had never done before. He stood up. He had never left before finishing his meal. But last night, he stood up, walked out of the diner, and disappeared into the dark. He didn't pay. He didn't say goodbye. Just left. I told my manager everything this morning. She checked the security footage, and that's when I realized the most disturbing thing. We have recordings of every night he had been here. Every night, the same booth, the same meal, the same brutality. But not last night. Last night, the camera showed me walking to his table, talking to an empty sit, taking an order that no one had given, bringing food to a booth that no one had ever sat in. But I knew what I saw. I know he was there. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself it was a trick of the cameras, a glitch, a coincidence. Maybe the footage was corrupted. Maybe the camera was angled wrong. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me after weeks of watching this strange man eat alone. But deep down, I knew he had been there. I could still hear his voice in my head. I've been practicing. Practicing what? Acting normal, blending in, or something worse. I decided not to go to work the next night. I told my manager I was sick and spent the evening locked in my apartment, pacing. Every noise outside made me jump. Every shadow seemed too long. I kept checking the locks, making sure the windows were shut. I'd even considered calling the police, but what would I say? A man who doesn't exist has been watching me eat burgers for weeks. At around 11:30, the time he would normally come in, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I stared at it for a long time before answering. I didn't say anything. Neither did they. But I could hear something. A slow, wet chewing sound. My stomach flipped. I hung up and threw my phone on the couch like it was contaminated. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do. If I called back, would he answer? And then a knock at my door. A single, sharp knock. I froze. I live on the 3rd floor. There's only one entrance. No one buzzed up. No footsteps footsteps in the hallway, but someone was standing on the other side of my door. I crept toward the peephole, every part of me screaming to stay back, and then I heard it, a slow, deliberate whisper. I think I've got it now. I didn't look. I couldn't. Instead, I turned off every light, crawled into my bathroom, and locked the door. I stayed there for hours, heart hammering in my chest, waiting for the sound of footsteps, the creak of the door, a shadow under the crack. Nothing. Eventually, the sun rose, and I dared to peek outside. There was no one there, but on my welcome mat, sitting neatly in the center, was a hamburger, plain, no toppings, cut into perfect squares. I quit my job that morning. I moved in with a friend across town. I changed my number. I don't go out alone after dark. I haven't stepped foot near the diner since, and I haven't seen him again. But sometimes, late at night, when I least expect it, I hear the sound of slow, deliberate chewing. For a while, I convinced myself that it was over. I left the diner, changed my number, moved to a different neighborhood, and tried to push it all out of my mind. I told myself he was just a weirdo, someone with a strange obsession, and that if I stayed away, he would forget about me. I was wrong. It started again about a month later. I was staying with my friend Jenna, crashing on her couch while I figured out my next move. One night, she decided to order takeout, and I offered to grab it from the front door. It was late, maybe 10:30, and the street was quiet. I stepped outside, grabbed the bag, and turned to head back in, and then I saw it. Sitting on the porch railing, neatly placed in the center, was a single white plate, a plate hamburger, cut into perfect squares. My blood ran cold. I didn't say anything to Jenna. I didn't want to scare her. I just picked up the plate, walked to the trash bin, and threw it away. My hands were shaking the whole time. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Jenna mentioned something that made my stomach turn. "Did you hear someone outside last night?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. I thought I heard footsteps on the porch around, I don't know, 3 a.m. I forced a smile, shook my head, and said I hadn't heard anything. That was the first lie. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, the plate was inside. I woke up groggy, rubbing my eyes, and shuffled into the kitchen for coffee. And there it was, on the kitchen table, a plate hamburger, cut into perfect squares. I nearly dropped my mug. My hands went cold. I turned to Jenna, heart pounding. Did you leave this here?" My voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. She frowned, confused. "What? No, I just woke up. What are you talking about?" I pointed at the plate, my entire body trembling. Her expression changed. Confusion melted into fear. Neither of us had put it there, and yet it sat there, neat, deliberate, waiting. Jenna grabbed her phone and called the cops. They came, took our statements, and looked around, but there were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked, the windows were shut, no fingerprints, nothing missing. They told us it was probably a prank, that someone had broken in just to leave food on the table. They offered to send extra patrols in the area. I nodded. I thanked them. I pretended to feel better, but I knew the truth. He had been inside, and he was getting closer. Jenna and I started locking every door, every window, every night. We even pushed furniture in front of the doors. I barely slept. My nerves were fried. I was jumping at every noise. But for a week, nothing happened. Then, one morning, I opened the fridge, and there it was, a plain hamburger, cut into perfect squares. I slammed the door shut so hard the shelves rattled. I backed away, heart hammering, bile rising in my throat. Jenna came running. I pointed at the fridge, unable to speak. She opened it, saw the plate, covered her mouth with her hand. "We're leaving," she whispered. "We packed in under an hour." Jenna went to stay with her parents. I moved into a short-term rental under a different name. I wanted to disappear. That night, my phone rang, an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered. I knew I shouldn't have answered, but my hands moved on their own, lifting the phone to my ear. Silence, then a slow, wet chewing sound, and a whisper. "You eat so naturally now." I threw the phone across the room. I never answered an unknown number again. I never stayed at one place for too long. I never, ever eat hamburgers anymore. I live in a small town where everything closes early and most people keep to themselves. One of my favorite things to do is take late night walks. It's peaceful, quiet, and I rarely run into anyone. The town is well lit, and I always stick to main roads, so I've never felt unsafe. That changed one night. I was walking my usual route, past the closed bakery and the darkened windows of the pharmacy, when I noticed something odd. A man was walking toward me on the opposite sidewalk, but his stride was it was almost like he wasn't bending his knees, his steps mechanical and deliberate. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, not at anything, just staring forward. I didn't think much of it at first. Some people are just weird, right? But then, as we passed each other, I got this overwhelming sense of wrongness. I don't know how else to describe it. My skin prickled, my stomach knotted, and my instincts screamed at me to keep walking, to not look back. I ignored them. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw something that still makes my blood run cold. The man had stopped. He was standing completely still in the middle of the sidewalk, his head tilted slightly as if he were listening listening for something, and then, without turning around, he started walking again. But this time, he was going back the way he came. That shouldn't have been so terrifying, but it was. His movements were just as stiff, his posture just as unnerving. It was like he had been placed on a track, walking a programmed path, and suddenly, the script had changed. I picked up my pace. My apartment was only a few blocks away. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. Then I heard it. Footsteps. I didn't need to turn around to know they belonged to him. They were too precise, too evenly spaced, too unnatural. I reached my building and yanked the door open, practically throwing myself inside. The second it shut behind me, I turned the lock and pressed myself against the wood, listening. Silent. After a few minutes, I gathered the courage to peek through the peephole. The street outside was empty. The man was gone. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just some strange guy passing through town. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was sick. I wanted to believe that. Then, the next night, I saw him again, standing across the street, not walking, not moving, just watching. I moved out 2 weeks later. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, maybe even just the lingering effects of fear from the night before. But the man wasn't a figment of my imagination. For 3 nights straight, he was there, always across the street from my apartment, never closer, never farther, just standing in the same spot, at the same time, never moving, never reacting. At first, I thought he was staring at me, but the longer I watched, the more I realized he wasn't looking at anything at all. His head was tilted just slightly, like he was listening again, like he was waiting. On the 4th night, I stopped looking. I shut my blinds, locked my doors, and forced myself to act like he wasn't out there. It didn't help. I could still feel him. The air in my apartment felt heavier, thick with the suffocating presence of something I couldn't explain. I didn't sleep that night, and then on the 5th night, he was gone. I cracked the blinds open at 11 p.m. Nothing. That night, still nothing. By 1 a.m., I started to believe it was over, until I heard a sound from the hallway outside my apartment. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, deliberate, almost like footsteps, but they were too light, too measured, and they didn't move. They just stayed right outside my door. I sat frozen on my couch, staring at the door like it might fly off its hinges. My mind screamed at me to check the peephole, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Every nerve in my body told me not to look. Then something changed. The air in my apartment shifted, like the room itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it. A whisper, not words, not a voice I could recognize, just something low and broken, like the sound of static through an old radio. It came from right outside the door, creeping in through the wood, slipping beneath the frame. I was shaking. My hands were cold, my breath uneven. Every single instinct screamed at me to stay still, to not move, to not breathe too loudly. And then, just like that, it stopped. The air returned to normal. The pressure lifted, and when I finally worked up the courage to check the peephole, the hallway was empty. The man never came back after that. But the strangest part, the next morning, I asked my neighbor, an old man who had lived in the building for over 30 years, if he had ever seen anything weird around here, if he had ever noticed a man standing outside, or heard noises in the hallways at night. He gave me a strange look and shook his head. No, he said, frowning, but I'll tell you something, you're not the first tenant in that apartment to ask me that. I moved out that weekend. I don't know who or what the man was. I don't know if he was real, if he was something else entirely, or if my mind twisted some coincidence into a waking nightmare. But I do know one thing. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That moving out put an end to whatever had been following me. But things don't work that cleanly, do they? For a while, it seemed like it did. My new place was across town, in a busier area. More people, more noise. It felt safer. I told myself it was over, and for a few months, it was. Then, one night, I was walking home from a late shift at work. The air was cold, the streets wet from a recent rain. The city felt alive, the way only cities do at night. Traffic lights flickering, distant sirens, the hum of people in bars and restaurants. And then, between all of that, a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. I stopped mid-step. My stomach dropped. My skin prickled with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned my head slowly, my pulse hammering in my throat. At first, I didn't see anything, just a street lamp casting a pool of yellow light onto the wet sidewalk. A few parked cars, the entrance to an alleyway. Then I saw him, standing just beyond the glow of the street light, where the darkness was thickest. The man, he wasn't moving. He wasn't walking toward me. He was just standing there, half shrouded in shadow, his head tilted ever so slightly, listening. The wrongness of it hit me like a brick to the chest. I took a step back. He took a step forward. I didn't wait. I turned and walked fast, faster than I ever had before. My heart was in my throat, my breath short and ragged. I could hear footsteps behind me, steady, even, perfectly paced. I didn't dare look back. I made it to my apartment, slammed the door, and locked it. My whole body was trembling, my fingers ice cold. I pressed my ear against the door store. Silent. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after that. I tried to convince myself I was wrong, that it was just a coincidence. But I do. And then 2 days later, I got a text, a number I didn't recognize. One word, listening. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know how he found me, but I do know one thing. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, he will always be just a step behind, waiting, listening, and I don't think I'll ever be able to stop him. I used to work in a small, independent bookstore in a quiet town. It wasn't particularly old or famous, just a cozy little place with wooden shelves and a resident cat named Theo. The store sat at the far end of Birch Street, away from the busier parts of town, and at night, it always felt a little too quiet. My shifts usually ended around 10 p.m., and since my apartment was only a few blocks away, I'd walk home alone. It was never a problem until the night I met Effie. It started when I was closing up. I had just turned off the lights when I noticed movement outside the front window. A man stood there, just beyond the glow of the street lamp, watching me. He wasn't close enough for me to see his face clearly, but something about the way he stood, perfectly still, made my skin crawl. I hesitated, then stepped toward the door, trying to act like I hadn't seen him. Maybe he was just a late customer, disappointed we were closed. But as I reached for the lock, he moved just slightly, not stepping forward, not waving, just a shift of weight, like he was waiting for something. I locked the door quickly and turned off the open sign. I figured he'd get the message and leave, but he didn't. Instead, he drifted to the side of the store, disappearing out of sight. I waited a minute, heart hammering in my chest, before grabbing my bag and heading for the back exit. The alley behind the store was dimly lit, but it led straight to the main road. I stepped out cautiously, glancing both ways. Empty. I exhaled, feeling ridiculous for being so paranoid, and started walking. Halfway down the alley, I heard it. Footsteps, not behind me, not approaching, just there, like they were keeping pace with me, but from nowhere. They stopped, so did the footsteps. I took another step, so did they. The cold sweat broke out on my neck. I spun around, scanning the alley, but there was no one. No one in the shadows, no one near the dumpsters, no one in the recessed doorway of the old bakery. I forced myself to move faster, nearly jogging as I reached the street. I didn't stop until I was at my apartment door, slamming it shut behind me and bolting every lock. I barely slept that night. The next evening, I told my manager what had happened. She gave me a sympathetic look but shrugged it off as a one-time encounter. Probably just some weirdo, she said. We'll keep an eye out. That night, I left work with Theo in my arms. One of the perks of working there was that I could take him home when I closed. He purred in my jacket as I walked. The street was empty, the bookstore dark behind me. And then I saw him again, not standing on the sidewalk this time, standing in the bookstore. The lights were off. The door was locked. I knew that. But there he was, standing in the darkness between the shelves, just barely visible through the window. And he was looking at me. I bolted. I don't remember getting home, but I do remember locking myself in my bedroom. Theo still clutched in my arms, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. The next day, I called out of work. When I finally returned, 2 days later, my manager was waiting for me with a frown. "You didn't lock up properly the other night," she said. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the back exit. The door was unlocked when I came in the next morning. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me. I knew I had locked it. I quit that same week. A few months later, the bookstore closed for good. But sometimes, when I pass by the empty building, I swear I still see him, standing there, watching and waited. A few months after I quit, the bookstore officially shut down. The owner had been struggling financially for a while, and I guess my creepy encounter was just another reason to leave it behind. For a while, I avoided Birch Street completely. I took longer routes to work, dodging the eerie feeling that always lingered when I thought about the store. But time passed, and the fear dulled, at least I thought it did. One evening, I was walking home from a late shift at my new job when I found myself near Birch Street without thinking. The street was quieter than I remembered, the bookstore now dark and lifeless with a for lease sign in the dusty front window. The sight gave me a strange sense of relief. Maybe the man, whatever he was, had moved on too. Then I saw the door. It was open, just slightly, barely an inch, but open enough that the darkness inside seemed to bleed out into the street. A cold wave of dread washed over me. This door had been empty for months. There was no reason for that door to be open. I told myself to keep walking, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but then something shifted inside the store. A flicker of motion, like someone moving between the empty shelves. I should have run. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then something stepped into the doorway. Not a person, at least, not fully. The shape was wrong. Tall, too tall for the frame, its head nearly brushing the top. Its shoulders were narrow, its limbs elongated, and its face. I still don't know what I saw. It wasn't a mask, wasn't a shadow. It was something empty, like looking into a place where a person should be, but wasn't. And then it moved, not toward me, but closer somehow, without stepping forward, like the space between between us had shrunk in an instant. I stumbled backward, my body finally kicking into motion. My hand scrambled for my phone, but I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I turned and ran. I don't remember getting home. I just remember locking my door, shutting every curtain, and curling up on my bed with Theo pressed against my chest, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. That night, I barely slept, but in the few minutes I did, I dreamed of the bookstore, of it, watching me. Waited. I moved out of that town a few weeks later. I never told anyone what I saw, and I never looked back. But sometimes, when I pass by a darkened storefront, when I see a door just barely ajar, I get that same feeling in my gut, like something is waiting, watching, still looking for me. I moved 3 towns over, started fresh, new job, new apartment, new routine. I even convinced myself that what happened on Birch Street was some kind of waking nightmare, a trick of exhaustion and fear. For a while, things were normal until they worked. It started small, a feeling of being watched when I walked home, lights flickering just as I passed by, like Cat, Theo, hissing at the front door for no reason. Then the dreams came back, not dreams, the same dream. I'm standing in front of the bookstore again. The door is open just a crack. I know I shouldn't go inside, but something is pulling me forward. I step inside. The shelves are empty, the air thick with dust, but in the back of the store, in the shadows, something is waiting. I wake up gasping, my heart pounding, every time, just before I see its face. At first, I told myself it was just stress, that I was still haunted by what happened, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, the real world sign started. One evening, after a late shift, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. I was sure I had locked it when I left. My stomach nodded as I pushed the door open, but everything inside looked normal. Nothing was stolen, nothing was out of place. The only thing different, Theo was hiding under the bed, his fur bristled, his eyes wide with terror. I locked the door, checked every room, every closet. Nothing, but I didn't sleep at night. The next day, I asked my landlord if maintenance had come in while I was gone. He shook his head. There would have been inside. That's when I knew. I hadn't escaped it. A week later, I got home from work and found a book sitting on my kitchen table. A book I did not own. It was old, too old. The pages yellowed, the spine cracked. There was no title, no author, just a single sentence scrawled across the first page in jagged, uneven handwriting. He left the door open. I slammed the book shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had never brought this book into my apartment. I grabbed Theo, shoved him into his carrier, and left. I didn't pack, didn't think. I just left. I checked into a hotel that night and didn't go back for 3 days. When I finally returned, I half expected my apartment to be ransacked, or worse, for the book to be gone. But no, it was still there, sitting in the exact same place on my kitchen table. I moved out that week. I don't know what it was. I don't know how it followed me, but I know one thing. It's not just a man. It never was. And I don't think it's done with me yet. So if you ever find yourself walking past a bookstore at night, one that feels too quiet, too empty, keep walking. I never liked planetariums. Something about the darkness, the simulated sky, and the way the room feels larger than it should be always unsettled me. But when my friend Jenna begged me to go with her to a special late night showing at our local planetarium, I gave in. It was a one-night only event, an exclusive screening of a newly discovered star system, supposedly accompanied by a special surprise. The promotional flyer was vague, but Jenna was excited, and I didn't want to be the boring friend. The place wasn't crowded, maybe a dozen people scattered throughout the vast dome-shaped theater. Jenna and I took seats near the back, directly in the center. The air smelled slightly stale, like old carpet and something metallic. The show began normally enough, the usual deep voice narrator explaining cosmic formations as the ceiling transformed into a sea of stars. I let myself relax. The visuals were mesmerizing. Then, the special surprise segment started. The narrator's voice cut out mid-sentence. The screen went completely black. I expected an effect, maybe a simulated blackout to make the stars pop more dramatically. Instead, silence stretched long enough that people began shifting in their seats. Then a single point of white light appeared on the ceiling. A star. No, it wasn't twinkling. It grew larger, brighter, until it was the size of the full moon. And then it blinked. Not flickered, blinked. A slow, deliberate movement. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Someone laughed nervously. The eye, because that's what it was, an enormous eye, began scanning the room. Its gaze drifted across the seats, searching. I squeezed Jenna's arm. What the hell is this? She didn't answer. I turned to her, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the row ahead of us. There was a man sitting there. I hadn't noticed him before, and something about him didn't feel right. His head was tilted back too far, like his neck was broken, staring directly at the blinking eye above us. He was smiling. No one else seemed to notice him. The eye moved again, faster this time. It darted between audience members, the light from it illuminating their faces in sharp contrast. Each time it stopped on someone, they flinched or shifted uncomfortably as if feeling some unseen pressure. Then it stopped on me. I swear to God, I felt it. A horrible, cold weight settled over over me, pressing against my chest like something unseen was leaning in. I wanted to move, to run, but I couldn't. My limbs refused to respond. The man in front of me let out a slow, rattling laugh. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the screen cut back to a normal starry sky. The narrator's voice resumed mid-sentence, as if nothing had happened. The audience shuffled awkwardly. People chuckled, whispered about how creepy that segment was. But the man in front of me, he was gone. Jenna and I bolted out of the theater the second the lights came up. We didn't talk until we were outside, under the safety of real stars. I don't think that was part of the show, she finally said. I agreed. We never found out what that special surprise was supposed to be. I checked online later. There were no mentions of a late night event at the planetarium. No advertisements, no records, nothing. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. A few days later, I was scrolling through my photos when I found one I don't remember taking. It's blurry, grainy, like it was snapped in motion. But I know what it is. The last row of the planetarium, and in the center of the frame, sitting in my seat, was me. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to make sense of it. It had to be a glitch, a trick of the light, maybe a reflection. But no, the figure in the seat was unmistakably me. Same jacket, same posture, same damn way I sit with one hand on my knee. I checked the metadata. The timestamp said it was taken 7 minutes after we left the planetarium. My stomach turned. I hadn't taken this. Jenna wouldn't have taken this. And even if she had, how would it show me sitting there when I was already outside? I showed it to her the next day, and the second she saw it, she turned pale. Delete it, she whispered. What? Delete it? There was something raw in her voice, something I'd never heard before. I hesitated for a second, but then did it. I deleted the photo from my gallery, went into the trash folder, and wiped it for good measure. Jenna exhaled in relief. Good, it's gone. But that night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. New photos saved to your gallery. My throat closed up. My hands were clammy as I opened my gallery, dreading what I would see. It was the same picture, same angle, same me. Only this time, I wasn't alone. There was someone sitting next to me. I wish I could tell you what they looked like, but I can't. My mind will hold on to the details. Every time I try to focus, it's like my brain refuses to process their face, like the image won't let me remember. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Jenna wouldn't answer my calls. I finally drove to her apartment, knocking until she let me in. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling. I got one too, she said before I could even ask. She held up her phone. It was my seat in the planetarium again, but this time, the figure sitting there wasn't me. It was her. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what we sat through that night, but we haven't gone back to the planetarium. And every night at 2:17 a.m., a new photo appears on my phone. Each time, the image is a little clearer. Each time, the thing sitting next to me looks a little closer. And last night, I swear to God, I felt something breathe on the back of my neck. I didn't sleep at all last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear something faint, like the shuffle of fabric against a seat, like someone shifting in the darkness behind me. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I had to. The photo had changed. It was still the planetarium, still my seat, still that figure sitting next to me, only this time, I could almost see its face. The details were still blurred, like a corrupted file, but it had shifted its posture. It was leaning forward slightly, facing the camera, face away. I dropped my phone and scrambled away from it like it had burned me. My heart was hammering in my chest, my skin ice cold. I called Jenna, but she didn't pick up. I called again. Nothing. Something was wrong. I grabbed my keys and drove to her apartment as fast as I could. Her car was in the lot. Lights off. Curtains drawn in. I knocked. No answer. I pounded harder. Jenna, it's me. Open the door. Still nothing. I don't know what possessed me to try the handle, but I did. I turned easily. Unlocked. Inside, the apartment was silent. Too silent. No humming appliances. No street noise. Nothing. Just a thick, suffocating stillness. Jenna's phone was on the counter. The screen was on, stuck on her gallery. I picked it up with shaking hands. There was a new photo. Her seat at the planetarium, but Jenna wasn't in it. Instead, the thing in the seat was now sitting alone. No blurred features. No distortion. It was fully visible, and it was smiling. I read. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, locking the doors, gasping for breath. I didn't know what to do. Who to call? The police. What the hell would I tell them? Jenna was gone, and whatever had taken her had left a message. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but my body moved on its own. A live notification from my camera. Face detected. Tap to view. I was alone in the car. I didn't tap. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, pulse pounding in my ears. And then, in the silence, I heard it. A slow, deliberate exhale, right behind me. I'm writing this from a motel on the edge of town. I don't know what to do. I don't know where Jenna is. I don't even know if she's still Jenna anymore. And worst of all, tonight's photo has already appeared. It's a picture of my seat at the planetarium, and this time, it's empty. I was never one for fancy gifts, but when my sister gifted me a voucher for a private calligraphy lesson, I figured, why not? It was something different. The place was a tiny, unassuming shop sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a locksmith in a part of town I didn't usually visit. When I arrived, the door was slightly ajar, and a small brass bell jingled as I stepped inside. The air smelled of ink and old paper. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with ornate pens, parchment, and delicate bottles of ink. A single large table sat in the middle, covered in parchment scraps and an array of nibs and brushes. At the far end of the shop, a man was seated with his back to me, writing with slow, deliberate strokes. "Hello," I called softly. He didn't turn right away. Instead, he finished the stroke he was working on before placing the pen down with a careful precision. Then, he rose smoothly and turned to face me. The man was old but not frail. He had an odd, statuesque stillness about him, his posture unnervingly straight. His suit was immaculate, but what stood out the most was his face. It wasn't disfigured or grotesque, nothing so obvious, but something about it was off, as though it was too symmetrical, too smooth, like a face you'd see at a painting rather than on a living person. "You must be the student," he said in a voice that was deep and measured. I nodded and introduced myself. He simply gestured for me to sit. The lesson began normally enough. He explained different techniques, demonstrated how to hold the pen, how to control pressure, but then he took out a roll of parchment, older than the ones I had seen before. The edges were slightly curled, tinged with a yellowish hue. "Try copying this," he instructed, rolling it out in front of me. The script was intricate, winding letters unlike any language I recognized. They were beautiful, almost hypnotic in the way they twisted and looped together. "What language is this?" I asked. His lips barely curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It is old." That was all he said. I should have left then, but I didn't. I dipped the pen into the ink, hesitating only a second before copying the first character. The moment my pen touched the parchment, I felt it, a shift, a static-like pressure in the air, as if the room itself exhaled. My fingers tingled, and an unexplainable unease crept up my spine. I forced myself to keep writing, but with each stroke, the room felt tighter. The shadows stretched strangely. The air grew thick, like I was underwater. My heart pounded, and then something moved. Not the man, not me. The ink, it slithered, just slightly, like something beneath it was shifting. I gasped, dropping the pen, and pushed back from the table. The man watched me, expression unchanged. "You feel it, don't you?" I could only stare at the parchment. The letters I had written, imperfect and clumsy, were gone. The rest of the script remained, but my additions had vanished completely, as if they had been absorbed. I didn't ask questions. I stood abruptly, muttered something about needing to leave, and backed away. The man tilted his head. "You are not finished," he said, but I was already at the door. I yanked it open and stumbled outside, barely hearing the bell jingle behind me. The moment I was out, the suffocating pressure lifted. I turned back only once. Through the shop's window, the man was still seated, watching me. The parchment was in front of him, and I swear, I saw it move. I don't know what I wrote. I don't want to know. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I left, and life returned to normal, but it didn't. That night, I dreamt of ink, thick, black ink seeping through my fingers, pulling onto a page I couldn't see. It dripped in slow, heavy drops, spelling out words in a language I didn't understand, and underneath the ink, something was moving, shifting, watching. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat. The next morning, my first instinct was to throw out everything from the lesson, the pen, the parchment scraps, even the clothes I wore that day. But when I reached into my bag to grab them, the parchment wasn't there. I knew I had taken it. I remembered shoving it into my bag before leaving, but it was gone. At work, I felt, like I wasn't alone, even when I was. A weight pressed between my shoulders, like something unseen was standing just behind me, watching. Several times, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, just a flicker, just a shadow, but when I turned, nothing was there. By nightfall, I was exhausted, but sleep didn't come easily. When I finally drifted off, the dreams returned. This time, I wasn't just watching the ink, I was writing. In the dream, my hand moved against my will, dipping a quill into an inkwell and dragging it across parchment. I could feel the rough texture of the paper, the smooth glide of the ink. I couldn't stop. Letter by letter, I traced the symbols, and as I wrote, I felt something stir. Somewhere in the distance, a whisper, not a voice, something older, something deeper. It rumbled beneath my skin, curling around my ribs like unseen fingers. I woke up with a start, my hand cramping, and that was when I saw it. On my bedside table, where I knew I had left nothing, sat a fresh piece of parchment. On it, in my own handwriting, were the same symbols from the lesson. I lost my mind a little after that. I skipped work, kept the lights on, threw out every pen and notebook notebook I owned. I didn't care if it was irrational, I wasn't taking any chances. And still, the dreams continued. Every night, I wrote. Every morning, a new parchment would be waiting. I tried to destroy them, burn them, tear them, throw them into water, but it never mattered. They always came back, pristine and untouched. After a week, I was a wreck. My head had slipped. I barely ate. It felt like something was burrowing into my thoughts, carving out pieces of me to make room for it. I had to go back. The shop looked the same, like nothing had happened. I hesitated at the door, hand trembling on the handle. The bell jingled when I stepped inside. The air still smelled of ink and old paper, but the table was empty. The calligrapher wasn't there. I stepped forward, heart pounding, hello, no answer, a rustle, then a whisper. I turned sharply, but there was no one, just the shelves, the parchment, the pens. But something was wrong. I could hear the whispering, but it wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from the pages, hundreds of them, stacked neatly, bound in books, tucked into drawers. The ink on them was moving, shifting, like something underneath was breathing. I took a step back, and then I saw it. On the center table, waiting for me, was a single blank parchment. A pen rested beside it, uncapped, ink glistening. The whispering grew louder, urgent, and beneath it, layered within the murmur of shifting ink, I heard something else. My own voice, writing, then finishing. I read, I don't know how I made it home. I don't know if I was followed. I don't know if I ever really left that shop. All I know is that the dream stopped after that, but sometimes, late at night, I wake up to find ink on my fingers. And no matter how many times I move apartments, no matter how many times I check, I always find a fresh piece of parchment waiting, and the whispering never really goes away. I stopped sleeping. It didn't matter how exhausted I was, I knew what waited for me when I closed my eyes. The whispering never stopped. Some nights, it was a low murmur, barely noticeable over the hum of the city. Other nights, it was relentless, pressing into my skull like ink seeping into paper. I'd wake up with my hands twitching, aching as if I'd been writing for hours. And always, there was the parchment. It followed me. I'd moved 3 times, threw out every page I found. And yet, the moment I let my guard down, there it was again, sitting on my desk, my kitchen counter, my bedside table. Waited. The writing had changed, though. It wasn't just the same symbols from before. It was my own handwriting now. Sometimes it was just a sentence. Other times, full pages of text I didn't remember writing. I stopped reading them after the first few, because the first time I did, I saw something I couldn't explain. I had written about things that hadn't happened yet, and then they did. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was some kind of elaborate stress-induced hallucination, that I was sleepwalking, writing in my sleep, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, one night, the whispering changed. It wasn't coming from the parchment anymore. It was coming from inside my apartment. I froze. It was past midnight. My lights were off, and I was alone. Or at least, I was supposed to be. The whispering wasn't a sound anymore. It was a presence. A shape pressing against the edges of the darkness. My heart pounded as I turned on the nearest light. The whispering stopped, but there was someone standing in my doorway. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A person. No, not a person. It was him, the calligrapher. He stood unnaturally still, the same eerie smoothness to his face, the same too perfect suit. His hands were folded in front of him, perfectly clean, perfectly composed. He shouldn't have been there. The door was locked. My apartment was on the 5th floor. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, he raised one hand, a single finger pressed to his lips. A warning. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then he spoke. You are nearly finished. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It cut through the air, through me. I shook my head, backing away. I don't know what you mean. He took a single step forward. Your work is almost complete. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. I don't want to write anymore, I whispered. His expression didn't change. That is not for you to decide. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a pen, the same one I had used in the lesson, the same one I had left behind. He held it out to me. My body moved on its own, fingers curling, reaching. I tried to fight it, to stop, but my hands were no longer my own. I could hear the whispering inside me now. It wasn't coming from the ink. It was coming from my bones. I had to do something, so I did the only thing I could. I closed my eyes. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms, and I willed myself to wake up, to break free, to do anything but write. The whispering turned to a roar, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was alone. The calligrapher was gone. The whispering was gone, but the pen was still there, sitting on my desk. Waited. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the next. I was afraid to, because I knew, deep down, I knew that if I did, I would wake up to find myself writing again. That if I so much as picked up that pen, I would finish whatever I had started, and I didn't want to know what happened when I did. I don't know how much time has passed since then. Days, weeks. Time feels strange now. The whispering hasn't come back, but neither has the silence. I still see ink smudges on my fingers sometimes, even though I haven't touched a pen, and I still find the parchment apartment. Always blank, always waiting. I don't know what I was writing. I don't know who or what wanted me to finish. I was visiting my best friend, Lauren, who had just moved into an old brownstone apartment near the city center. The building was charming in that probably haunted but definitely overpriced kind of way. High ceilings, intricate crown molding, and a staircase that groaned no matter how lightly you stepped. Lauren had been there for about a month and loved it, except for one thing. There's something weird about the stairwell mirror, she said one night as we sat on her floor eating takeout. Every time I walk past it, I feel like I catch something in the reflection. Just for a second, I laughed. Like what? A ghost? She rolled her eyes. No, just something. The mirror in question was huge. An old, gilded thing bolted to the wall on the landing between the second and third floors. It had probably been there since the building was constructed. I'd walked past it earlier, but nothing had seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of it. Later that night, when I was heading to bed in her guest room, I remembered I left my phone downstairs. I padded out into the hallway and toward the staircase. The whole building was dead silent. As I reached the landing, I slowed down, glancing at the mirror. My reflection was there, of course, but something about it unsettled me. I stepped closer. Everything looked normal. Dim hallway, peeling wallpaper, my own tired face staring back. Then I noticed something in the reflection behind me. A man. He was just barely visible at the edge of the frame, standing at the top of the stairs, half in shadow. I spun around instantly, my heart slamming against my ribs. There was no one there. I turned back to the mirror, but the reflection was normal again. Just the empty hallway stretching behind me. I felt sick. I practically ran back to Lauren's apartment, locked the door behind me, and stayed awake for hours listening for any sound outside. The next morning, I told Lauren what happened. She looked uneasy but not surprised. That's why I hate that mirror, she admitted. We decided to test something. I stood on the landing while she took a photo of the mirror. The first picture looked normal, just me, looking slightly nervous. Then we tried again. This time, I stepped to the side, leaving the reflection of the hallway empty, and there he was, a man, barely visible, standing at the top of the stairs. We both stared at the screen in horror. Lauren deleted the photo immediately. That was the last night I ever stayed there. Lauren moved out 6 months later. At first, I convinced myself that it had been a trick of the light or some old flaw in the glass catching shadows in just the right way, but I knew better. We both did. For a while, things were quiet. Lauren found a new apartment across town, a place without old mirrors bolted to the walls or staircases that seemed to listen when you walked. We didn't talk about what had happened. It felt safer that way, as if ignoring it meant it couldn't follow us. Then, about a year later, she called me in the middle of the night. I saw him again. My stomach dropped. Where? She hesitated. In my new place. But it was different this time. I didn't want to know, but I asked anyway. Lauren took a shaky breath. I was watching TV, and my phone was on the coffee table. The screen was black, like it had just timed out, but I could see the reflection of the room in it, and her voice broke for a second. He was there, standing in the doorway. I felt cold all over. Lauren, are you sure? Maybe it was just... I turned around, and he wasn't there, she said, but the reflection still showed him. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she whispered, I think he followed me. I wanted to tell her it was impossible, that things like that didn't happen in real life, but I couldn't. I'd seen him too. After that, Lauren stopped staying in one place for too long. Every few months, she'd move again, but no matter where she went, there were signs, reflections that didn't match reality, the shape at the edge of a darkened window, the feeling of someone watching when no one was there. The last time I heard from her was 2 months ago. She sent me a voice message, shaky, breathless. I don't think moving works anymore, she said. I don't think he's following me. I think he's with me. That was it. No goodbye, no explanation. I tried calling her back, but the number was disconnected. Her social media accounts were gone. It was like she had erased herself. And now I'm the one seeing things in the corner of my eye, catching glimpses of something just outside the edges of reflections. Last night, I woke up to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps outside my bedroom door. When I checked, no one was there, but in the hallway mirror, the door was still open, and he was standing just behind me. A week after that night, I convinced Lauren to talk to her landlord. Not that I expected much. Landlords aren't exactly known for their concern about creepy mirrors or potential apparitions, but to our surprise, he seemed oddly hesitant when she brought it up. He even avoided looking directly at the mirror when we mentioned it. Finally, he sighed and said, Look, I don't know what you think you saw, but that mirror's been here longer than I have. Some things in this building, they just stay. That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just a cryptic remark and a quick exit. it. Lauren and I decided to do our own digging. We searched old property records, local news archives, anything that might explain why that man was appearing in her mirror. And then we found something, a grainy black and white photo from the 1930s and an article about the brownstone's original tenants. It showed a group of men standing in the stairwell dressed in old-fashioned suits. But there was something wrong with the image. One of the men, standing near the top of the stairs, was blurred, not like he had moved while the photo was taken, but like he shouldn't have been there at all. His features were smudged, indistinct, but I recognized the shape of them, the same shape I had seen in the mirror. The article didn't say much, just that the building had once been used as a boarding house. There were mentions of an incident, a man who went missing without a trace, but no follow-up, no resolution. Just another person who stayed. Lauren was done after that. She put in her notice and left within the month, staying with family until she found a new place. I helped her move out, and on our last trip down the stairs, we both paused in front of the mirror one final time. The reflection was empty, just us. For a second, I thought it was over, but then, just before we turned away, something in the mirror shifted. Not a figure this time, just a single fingerprint, appearing slowly on the glass, right at eye level. I didn't even think. I grabbed Lauren's wrist, and we bolted. To this day, I refuse to walk past that building, and I don't look too closely at mirrors anymore. When I was a kid, my grandparents lived near an old reservoir. It was a beautiful place, with glassy water stretching out between the hills, but there was always something eerie about it. Maybe it was the way the fog clung to the surface at dawn, or how the water lapped against the shore without a sound. The thing about that reservoir was that it used to be a town. Decades ago, the valley had been flooded to create a water supply, and the entire town, buildings, streets, even the church, was left beneath the surface. Most people didn't talk about it, but sometimes, on dry years when the water was low, you could see the tops of old buildings just under the surface. I had an uncle, Joe, who loved to tell stories about the drowned town. He said you could still hear the church bell ring on cold nights, even though it had been underwater for years. That was just an old tale, but there was one thing he told me that always stuck with me. If you ever see a man standing in the water, don't talk to them. Just turn around and walk away. I thought it was another spooky story until I saw him. It was late summer, and I had taken my bike down to the reservoir alone. The sun was starting to set, casting the water in deep orange and purple, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth. I was skipping rocks when I noticed something strange. Out in the water, maybe 20 feet from the shore, stood a man. At first, I thought he was just another visitor, maybe a fisherman. But the longer I looked, the more I realized something was wrong. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, half submerged, arms hanging at his sides. The water reached just below his chest, and his clothes were dark and heavy like an old-fashioned suit. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he was looking at me. A deep, instinctive fear settled into my stomach. It was like my body understood something before my brain did. I took a step back. The man didn't move. Then, the water around him started to ripple, not like waves, but like something was shifting beneath the surface. I turned and ran. I pedaled home so fast I nearly crashed my bike. When I burst into my grandparents' house, gasping for breath, my uncle just looked at me. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said. I nodded. Uncle Joe took a deep breath and told me something I'll never forget. That town wasn't empty when they flooded it. Not everyone left in time. For years, I tried to convince myself that what I saw at the reservoir was just a trick of the light, a shadow, my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. I stayed away from the water. Even when my cousins went swimming or my uncle took his boat out to fish, I never set foot near that shore again. The thought of looking out and seeing him standing there, half submerged, waiting, no, I wasn't willing to take that risk. But the thing about ignoring something strange is that sometimes it doesn't ignore you. It was late one summer night when I woke up to the sound of dripping. At first, I thought it was the bathroom faucet. The house was old, and the pipes made noise sometimes. But as I sat up in bed, I realized the sound wasn't coming from inside the house. It was coming from outside my window. A slow, steady drip, 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 like water spilling off something soaked. I hesitated before pulling the curtain back. The yard outside was empty, bathed in the weak light of the moon. The trees swayed gently, nothing out of place. But then I noticed it, wet footprints leading up to my window from the direction of the reservoir. My stomach dropped. The prints were large, the impressions deep, as if whoever left them had been carrying something heavy. They stopped right below my window. I didn't see anyone standing there, but the dripping sound continued. I backed away, heart pounding. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to hide, but I couldn't look away. Then, from the silence, I heard something that sent ice through my veins. A faint, distant clanging, like a rusted bell ringing underwater. The next morning, the footprints were gone. No wet patches, no signs of water anywhere. If it weren't for the fact that my sheets were still damp from my own sweat, I could have convinced myself I imagined it, but I didn't. That day, my uncle found me sitting on the porch, staring in the direction of the reservoir. He sat down next to me and lit a cigarette, waiting. He followed you, didn't he? He finally asked. I didn't answer. Uncle Joe exhaled smoke, his expression unreadable. That's how it starts. First you see him, then he finds his way to you. I turned to look at him, fear bubbling in my chest. How do I stop it? My uncle didn't say anything for a long time. Then he crushed his cigarette beneath his boot and stood up. You don't go near the water, and you never answer when he calls. I moved away from my grandparents' town not long after that summer. I never went back to the reservoir, never walked along its shores again. Years passed, and the memory of that night became something I only thought about in the quiet moments when I was alone in the dark. Until last year, I was visiting my parents when I decided to take a drive through my old childhood town just to see what had changed. The reservoir was still there, of course, still eerily still shrouded in mist that clung to the surface. I wasn't planning to stop. I told myself I was just passing through, but then, just as I was about to turn back onto the highway, my headlights caught something standing at the water's edge. A man. His clothes were the same, old and dark, soaked to the bone. His posture was the same, arms limp, head slightly tilted, as if he were waiting. And though I was inside my car, safe, my blood ran cold when I realized one horrible thing. He was closer than before, no longer standing deep in the water, no longer 20 feet away. Now, he was right at the shoreline, right at the edge of the road. And this time, I saw his face. It wasn't bloated, or rotted, or decayed like you'd expect from something that had spent decades underwater. It was just wrong, empty, like something had forgotten how to be human but was still trying to wear a person's skin. His mouth was slightly open, like he was about to speak. And then the bell rang, not from a church tower, not from anything visible. It rang from inside my head, loud and echoing, vibrating in my skull, shaking my teeth. My vision blurred. I don't remember turning the wheel, but suddenly I was speeding away from the reservoir, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my parents' house, doors locked, lights on. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't gone back since, but sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I hear dripping outside my window. And once, just once, I could have sworn I heard a bell ring. I moved again, far away this time, and thousands of miles from that reservoir, from the town, from anything that could connect me back to them. I told myself I was safe, that whatever haunted those waters couldn't reach me here. And for a while, it seemed to work. Until last week, it started small, a faint ringing in my ears, like the distant echo of a church bell. I chalked it up to stress, ignored it. But then, the other sound started, dripping, always at night. I checked the pipes, the faucets, the air conditioning. Nothing was leaking, nothing should have been making that sound. But still, there it was, drip, drip, drip. Then, I began waking up to damp footprints in my apartment. At first, I thought I had tracked in water from outside, but that didn't make sense. The footprints started in the middle of the floor, no trail leading in from the door, no source of water, just wet, heavy impressions that faded by morning. And the worst part, they were getting closer to my bed. 2 nights ago, I woke up to a noise, not dripping, not the bell, it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I froze. I lived alone. I reached for my phone, my heart pounding, my pulse hammering in my ears. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then, a single, deliberate knock. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The knock came again, softer this time, and then the water began seeping under the door. Cold, dark, and possibly deep water spreading across the floor toward me. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I could only watch as the water pooled around my feet. It should have soaked my bed, my clothes, but it didn't. It just sat there, cold and waiting. Then, something shifted, a shadow under the door. Not a person, not something human. And just before I lost my nerve and bolted, I heard it. A voice. Hello's wrong. Come back. I don't remember jumping out of bed. I don't remember running into the bathroom and slamming the door shut. But I remember standing there, shaking, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Water dripped from my hair, but I hadn't stepped in any. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the water was gone. No footprints, no puddles, no evidence that anything had happened. But I knew better. I packed a bag, called a friend, told them I needed to stay with them for a while. I don't know if running will help. I don't know if distance makes a difference anymore. Because last night, before I left, I heard it again. A deep, distant ringing, not from a church, not from the street, from inside my apartment, inside my head. And when I turned to look at the front door, I saw something, a reflection in the peephole. Dark, soaked, waited. I don't think I can outrun him anymore. So, to the man in the drowned village, please. I used to love the rain, not in the poetic, dance in the storm kind of way. I just liked the way it muted the world, softened everything into a blur. It made things feel smaller, quieter, safer. That was before I met him. I was driving home late one evening from my friend's place, about a 40-minute trip to the windy back roads of my town. The forecast hadn't called for rain, but as I hit the halfway mark, the first few drops tapped against my windshield. Within minutes, it had escalated into a full downpour. My wipers struggled to keep up, and I slowed down, focusing on the white lines of the road. That's when I saw him, a lone figure, walking along the side of the road. No umbrella, no raincoats, just a thin shirt, jeans, and an odd sort of gait, one that wasn't quite a limp, but wasn't normal either. His head was tilted down, and his arms hung limp at his sides. I drove past him, barely sparing another glance. About 10 minutes later, my stomach dropped. I saw him again. Same clothes, same slumped posture, same odd gait. It was impossible. There had been no turnoffs, no shortcuts, just trees and fields and an unbroken stretch of road. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had just imagined passing him earlier. Maybe it was a different person. But as I drove past, something in me knew it was the same man. I sped up. 15 minutes left. The rain only got heavier, hammering my windshield like nails. The radio crackled with static, and my headlights struggled to cut through the storm. I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Then, ahead in the distance, no. He was there again. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. My car skidded, tires screaming against the wet pavement, stopping just feet away from him. For the first time, he lifted his head, and he smiled. It wasn't right. His mouth stretched too far, his lips thin and cracked. His teeth were wrong, some too small, some too big, some jagged like they'd been broken and never healed properly. I threw the car into reverse, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. As I backed up, my headlights flickered just for a second, and in that second, he moved. That worked. Not right, he just moved from the front of my car to my driver's side window. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe as he leaned down, then tapped once, twice, 3 times. I didn't look. I didn't dare. I just slammed the gas and sped past him, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't look at the road ahead. I just drove. By the time I reached my house, the rain had stopped. My driveway was dry, but my car wasn't. It was soaked, like it had just driven through a storm that didn't exist. I locked my doors, checked my windows, stayed awake until the first light of dawn. I haven't seen him since, but sometimes, when it rains, I hear a faint tap, once, twice, 3 times. I don't check the window, and I don't think I ever will. For a while after that night, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Stress, fatigue, the trick of the light and rain. But then, the tapping started happening inside. The first time, I was in my bedroom, half asleep, with rain pattering softly against my window. I had been doing a good job of ignoring my paranoia, convincing myself I was just overreacting, until I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from outside. It was from my closet door. I froze, every muscle in my body locking into place. My breath caught in my throat, and my stomach turned to ice. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling, the rain playing tricks on my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the blanket over my head like a child. But the next morning, my closet door was open, just a crack, and my carpet, which should have been dry, was wet. It didn't stop there. A week later, I was showering, letting the hot water soothe my nerves, trying to wash the fear away. The steam curled around me, fogging up the mirror. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. My heart nearly stopped. It was light, almost playful, from the other side of the shower curtain. I whipped it open, nothing, just steam and empty air. But when I turned to the mirror, something was wrong. The steam had cleared in 3 small, perfect circles, like fingertips had pressed against the glass, like something had been watching me. The last time I heard it was at work. I was staying late at my office, a tiny cubicle job in a half-empty building. It was raining again, harder this time, and most of my coworkers had already left. I kept my headphones in, trying to focus, trying to pretend like everything was fine. Then my screen flickered, and my headphones cut out. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. My stomach twisted. Slowly, I pulled my headphones off, barely breathing. It was coming from the cubicle behind me. I turned my chair just enough to peek over the divider. No one was there, but there was a puddle of water on the carpet, still fresh, still wet. I grabbed my things and ran. I don't know what he is. I don't know why he follows me, but I know one thing. He only comes when it rains. So now, when I see dark clouds roll in, when I smell the storm on the wind, I leave. I drive. I go where the sky is clear, and I pray that wherever he is, he stays in the rain. I wish that had been the end of it. I really do. For a while, my plan worked. If I saw rain in the forecast, I found somewhere dry. I spent weekends in the desert, took sudden road trips south, anything to stay ahead of the storm. It was exhausting, but it was safe. Until the rain found me anyway. It was late November, and the sky had been clear all day, not a single cloud. I had let myself relax just a little, thinking I could finally breathe again. I was at a small roadside motel, just passing through on my way to visit family. At 2:46 a.m., I woke up to the sound of rain. Not a drizzle, not a gentle storm rolling in from the distance. It was a downpour, sudden, violent. I bolted upright in bed, my pulse hammering in my throat. No, this wasn't right. I had checked the forecast. There was no rain scheduled for miles. But outside, I could hear it hammering against the windows, gushing from the motel's drain pipes, pooling in the parking lot. I reached for my phone, fumbling with the screen, checking the weather app with shaking hands. Clear skies. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the sheets, my mind racing. Okay. Maybe it was a freak storm. Maybe that tap. It came from the motel room door. I nearly choked on air. No, I didn't move, didn't make a sound. The door had a peephole. I could have looked. I did not. I sat there, frozen, counting my breaths, listening. The rain kept falling. Minutes passed, an hour. Eventually, exhaustion won, and at some point, I must have drifted into a fitful sleep. When I woke up, the rain was gone. The parking lot outside was dry. The air smelled like dust and pavement, like it hadn't seen a drop of water in weeks. And on the floor, just inside my door, was a single wet footprint. I don't know what to do anymore. Running isn't working. Avoiding the rain isn't enough, because now, it's following me even when the sky is clear. And last night, for the first time, I heard it from inside my apartment. A slow, deliberate, unmistakable sound. Tap, right outside my bedroom door. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.